this was the kind of directory structure that we saw. Okay, so if you carefully see now, there are different directories available. So first thing that you are going to find out, okay, will be this. So there is a, definitely you must have seen while you install software, the say NASM software using source code, you must have executed a command called configure /configure, correct? Have you seen contents of that file from the source code? What that /configure is supposed to address? What it is supposed to address? Yes, what it is supposed to address? ./configure does what? See, when you really wish to start installation, what are the preliminary things that are required to be available on the system? That verification should be done by somebody. Okay, when I say somebody, I mean to say some code. Okay, and that code definitely is added into what you can call as ./configure. So what it does is, like when it verifies that everything is okay, then it creates a make file for you. So there are two utilities. Are you able to see chat box? I am not able to see your comments over there. Hopefully you are seeing this. AutoConf and AutoMake. So try to find out what exactly these utilities are, AutoConf and AutoMake. Definitely one is targeting towards configuration, other one is targeting towards creating make. So you must have created make files for your source code. But then when you have multiple directories involved, so it's not only like adding all subdirectories and so on. Like for example, think of this. While you are trying to compile the source code without using this make, how will you do that? Now you must have heard something called as compiling the kernel. Like people do complete the process of kernel compilation where they do write, say, different line of code. So for example, like I will give you my experience, or I will share with you all my experience. Like in 2006 rather, I attended one of the course at IIT Mumbai which was related to GCC. Okay, which was like 6 days workshop for GCC internals, and there I was taught by Uday Khedkar sir and Abhijat Vichare. So they really talked about how can you change the object code directly, like the object code that was generated or that gets generated with your GCC is with x86 architecture or Intel 32-bit architecture. That time I am talking about the then time. Now what they gave us an assignment and they said, okay, now you are not to use Intel architecture, but you have to see that it will be generating the code for MIPS architecture. Okay, which might have been taught or heard, you might have heard about MIPS. So try to find out this one. So like if it is to be generated accordingly, so definitely there is a change. So for example, simply when we write C equal to A plus B, okay, as a statement in C, how that will get translated to? Correct, because every compiler or you may say every translator, majority of time when we do talk about middle level or high level kind of stuff, okay, ultimately majority of them do generate assembly code. Even let me tell you, whatever the byte code that you get with Java, it is similar form of what you call it as an object code. Now you might have heard, like when you do talk about Java or Java runtime or even Microsoft.NET framework, which is essential to execute different codes which are written with .NET, or maybe when we do talk about Java runtime, JRE, okay, Java Virtual Machine JVM, which is required. Why it is mandatory to have these softwares available on your machine whenever you want to work with the applications? Like when we say bytecode is available with Java, what is the alternative for .NET. Have you heard about the way that we see bytecode in Java? Is there any such alternative available with .NET code? Because .NET code can run on Linux platform as well. So like it is a parallel kind of technology that they implemented to fight with Java, because there was kind of a fight between Java and .NET compiler, specifically C# compiler or Visual C++ compiler. Now when we talk about this, ultimately the code, underlying code will be assembly code. Now when we write such kind of statement, C equal to A plus B, how many line of code will be generated for this particular statement? Correct. So it may be, it depends like where exactly you wrote this statement. If it is part of say function, ultimately some code will be required to handle the function. Correct. As well as we have to see what are the different arguments used. Maybe you call it as parameters for the function. Then definitely there is a need of, like when a function is to be executed, the epilogue and prologue used for execution of the function. Now when we do talk about this, what exactly this epilogue and prologue is of the code? Okay, maybe some of the things can be captured probably, or you will learn those things in your PP course. If not, you can search about this prologue of the code and epilogue of the code, correct, through GCC. Well, you will see that like whenever a function call is to be executed, you have to prepare an environment where that function call will get executed. So it will create its own stack for execution of the function, to keep return address and so on. And when execution of that function is over, whatever the stack that got created, it should be demolished. It should be removed, because ultimately we are going to the earlier stack from where the return address of the current program is kept. Correct. So there are multiple things happening. It's not only like talking about assembly language and writing code. It is kind of like when you are learning or designing any high level programming language, like say example, say Python, C, and so on. So there is some of you like might have a debate between like whether C, whether Python is going to be an interpreted language or a kind of compiler. Correct. So there are multiple views seen towards it. So there are multiple interpreters available which do interpret the code and work out. But while going beyond some limits, ultimately when I was talking about that bytecode available with Java, have you heard about the bytecode kind of similar aspect in .NET? Try to find out about this. What is CLR? Have you heard about this CLR? No? Okay, let us see. So this is common language runtime. Correct. Now if you see, .NET family is big collection of different programming languages altogether. Considering maybe the web-based programming languages or probably few other programming languages in that set. So how exactly all these are taken together and kind of code would be generated towards the end? So you will be requiring definitely some kind of tool which would be interpreting this bytecode. Now if you see what that JVM is playing as a role when it executes the bytecode or when it transfers the bytecode, why it is necessary to have JVM? You can unmute and let me know like why it is necessary to have JVM there installed on your machine. What was the necessity?
Sir, to provide a platform independent.
Okay, to provide the platform. Any other thing that you want to add? Yes, please. Let me tell you the experience that we had. When Java came into market, they started saying we are platform independent, we are platform independent. Now when you say you are platform independent, no matter which programming language you want to use or which operating system that you want to use, your code should get executed. But then they never told that time that you will require JVM to run. And they said, okay, when you want, you will install this one. Okay, and automatically that used to automatically install that code. So whenever you think of this, I am executing the code. Okay, and first part of code is not the actual code that I wrote, which we call as stub, STUB. And this stub is meant for verifying whether is this a proper environment for me to execute. If it is not, then I will create that kind of environment myself. So when I say I will create, I mean by I will install. So you must have seen whenever you are trying to install some software on Windows, it basically checks whether your .NET framework is updated or not. Same thing may happen with the Java enabled utilities as well. Right, so it checks, and if it is not, it will try to update that. And that would be done frequently by the code itself. That kind of code is written. And that code which verifies that environment is called a stub. Okay, which is first part of your code always, which verifies the things, and when everything is fine, then the rest of the code which was written by the programmer, which he or she says this should be the code executed to achieve a particular goal. Correct? And that's how these stubs are written. So when they say that we are platform independent, they wrote this stub, and that stub used to verify whether JRE or JVM is available. If JVM is not available, it used to install automatically. So it used to take that code in background. Correct. So there is no big achievement in saying platform independent. When I say like with my understanding, we should say like this. So if it is platform independent, ultimately there should not be any requirement of installing a software. It should be automatically done. Correct. But each of these languages, because the operating systems are different, their execution patterns are different, it was too difficult rather to really get that kind of aspect. Correct, because there is currently we are saying that only Intel is doing huge amount of work in terms of processor design, but there are other companies too. But then if you see market wise, like what we saw is Windows is one of the most used operating systems. Similarly, Intel is one of the most preferred hardware platform or processor family rather, which is used mostly by the users. Now when we do say this, ultimately, it was necessary for us to understand basic internals of like what exactly they do there. Correct, and that's what our target is to understand in this particular source code aspect, okay, of lesson. So you will see something called as MK files. So maybe like if you open that particular directory, you will be getting some more details about it. Okay, and then it contains README, and then there are some MAK files, which we may not be able to really understand. But if you see, if you have the following tools installed, the full installer package can be built. Correct. So now, until unless we read this, now you might not have worried about like what is. Have you heard of Perl? By the way, you are working with Python, correct? Have you heard about Perl? Perl is a scripting language, majority times used with the servers. Okay, server scripting kind of thing. So when we do talk about such kind of, and majorly like it is used by system analysts, or maybe one can say system administrators, to work with this lower level details of operating system, where you are going to interact directly with the operating system. Now when we do talk about such kind of aspect rather, some amount of code definitely is added there. So Perl, then it says a few other things. Okay, and now see how the README is written even. Correct, if you really see. Now your version and my version may not match, but you try to see like these files should be there for you. Nextly, like if you see, there will be some is this source brain behind the assembler. Okay, and see how many files are there. So for example, if I go with this assemble.c, it is not going to open up everything in front of me. Correct. So now how exactly I am going to interact with such a system then? So if you see the source code written, see the source code written. Okay. Now you will identify that the code written contains some amount of comments along with different options available. Now if I go to terminal, say for a while, let me share my terminal. Is it visible? Let us write Dan Mason. Now, what are the file formats? What are the options there? How many of the options were used by us? We used -E, we used -F, even capital F, correct? Then we used -G, and we haven't used other ones. Even -L was used by us. How many these options are? Now, if you see, like in the source code, what is the source code that we are looking for? So there are some bytecode specifications added in the first part. If you recall, these are the kind of things that we worked out in our second semester course. Okay, what exactly do they mean by? Correct, and like full interpretation can be seen rather of this aspect into Intel manual. What is the codes? What are the different codes? What kind of mnemonics are used for that purpose, and so on. And now this is written in the code. Like if you recall, I asked you to write an assembler as well with respect to Intel instruction set. Few instructions were picked by you, and then you ultimately work with it. Correct. So see now how the codes are explained. This is part of command. So like for example, when we say this 200, okay, for prefixes and so on. So if you move further even, you will see these are all things written in a where these things will be explored in this whole code. Correct. Okay, let us go below. So there are some structures used. Okay, and each one is containing some kind of errors. Now when you start directly writing, say for example, let me do this on the terminal. So if I write Mason, now what it says, no input file specified. Now where exactly this is written? So if I want to see this, can I find this error? Okay, where exactly this code might be written or added there? And if I go through my source code, like whichever the source code that is available. So if I try pasting this, it is not available. Sorry. So if I copy this and try to search in my file, so I'm not able to see this because like here I'm not using any source code viewer thing. So my suggestion would be try to download some editor which will permit you checking the source code. There are multiple editors available, source code editors to view for. So you even may go with say Emacs or VI kind of editor. But again, like when you open the file, only it will check into that file. So there should be some source code viewers available. Try to download them, work with them, and try to search for where exactly this is checked. Okay, so you will be having 15 minutes rather for this. Okay, download that file. I am creating till that time one form. What you have to do is you have to add where exactly you can find this particular error in the source code, and in which file this is added. So no input file specified. So till that time I am creating the form. My suggestion is now you try to find out that aspect. Don't put in comment window. You have to find out it, and then I will add the form, and then you have to add your answer in the form itself. Right? So download that source code. Okay, search for this. You may make use of grep even. Okay, for that purpose. To try to find out it. Sorry?
Present in the some directory only.
No, you have to search where exactly this is in that directory, in that whole directory, source code directory, in which file it is.
I found it in some.c. Some.c.
I expect you not to now answer in commonplace, right? Because it is to be found by everybody. Because otherwise what happens is if you try to answer it, majority of them only will note down. And so it will be better if but I will always share these kind of forms with you. Fine. So let us try to do that. So maybe like your chance is this chance you can make use of. I am sharing this form with you all, and then you add your answers there. Okay, you have to search that file and then check the chat window. You should be able to see this form, submit your answer there. So I will be creating this so that like you can keep this information little. Every time while whatever the new things that will be working around, that needs to be addressed by us or that to be found by us. Right? So submit your answers appropriately. You can provide the path. When I said file added, you can provide complete path of that file. Have you got that form? Yes. See the chat window. You will be able to see the form which I added there. Okay. Fine. So now when we do talk about this error which I explained, okay, which I was talking about. Now even if I write say lesson dash f, say let us take example of one of the file. Okay, so let us take this. So when I write this, even there will be this kind of thing. Where exactly it verifies this dash f? Keep writing this one with your one of the file. Create one text file. This is one another question that I am asking to you now. Where exactly this lesson dash f? Where it finds that okay. Now if you recall, we used to write this. So for example, if I write dash f, elf 32. Right, so if I see now ls.xampp.o dash l, what is the size? 672. So if I go with now 64, okay, and if I check again this, my size got changed, like the file size got changed, and definitely there is a difference between these formats. Now think of this, we started from here, okay, first line was executed, it identified there is a source code available, correct, as an input given, xampp.asm, and then with assumption that after dash f, one format is specified. Now how the control is passed, so for example, if I write dash f elf 32, where exactly it goes, which source code gets called there. So now think of this again tree structure, code tree, okay, your code, whole code, there is a hierarchy applied with respect to the directory structure that you see. Okay, so which file gets called when I write dash f elf 32, or which function gets called when I write dash f elf 32, when I write dash f elf 64. So if I go with this man lesson, and let us go with file formats, probably we should be able to see somewhere. Okay, lesson dash h. So you should be able to see different inputs with respect to your file. Okay, so if I go below, okay, debugging format and then file format. Fine. So now I want to see what are the different formats available there with NASM. So for example, if I go with man NASM, okay, so you may see some formats are there, the .co, .obj and so on, correct? So are there any other formats too? Like if I go below, it says you write this, so NASM dash HF. So these are all file formats supported by NASM for you. So depending upon the operating system platform that you are using, okay, for and the NASM as a software or assembler, depending upon it, your file would be different. So say for example, when we work with this NASM dash LF, let me write now AS86. Fine. If I write arrow dash L jamp.o, correct, it suddenly became smaller, and when I wrote ELF32, the size became 672, and even when I write say 64, the size. Now what is happening? Depending upon the kind of file format that you want to work with, it is changing. So if I take even this Windows 32-bit file, Win32, let us see the size. So it seems like this 64 and 32 over here, some of things looks to be same, correct? So if I go with 64, then the size should be somewhat different, correct, but it remained same. Now when we do talk about these all aspects, what exactly the difference between these all formats? So when we apply this NASM-HF, we got to know that okay, these all are the output formats. Okay, so what exactly they are? So this is common object file format, COF. So maybe you can definitely find out it like either by using Wikipedia or some other source rather about information about all of this. But then like our main interest, like what we saw, like we are using only ELF32. Okay, or we probably may use this ELF64 as well. But when we do talk about other file formats, because you are building an assembler. Now when you are building an assembler, you ultimately need to know what are the different formats I am going to support to. Correct. Now while supporting them, we definitely will require information about that architecture. So for example, they are supported to Mac OS as well, Motorola as well. Multiple formats are supported. Even they are saying okay, we can work with DOS, we can work with Microsoft Windows 32 or 64-bit environment, even Mac. Now when we do talk about this, what is the difference that the assembler should work out? So how like this file format, like being on Intel architecture, like this machine, the laptop that I am using, I am using an Intel architecture on my machine. Can I create a file which will be executed or which will be further used for other OS? So what we are doing? We are trying to use this OS and we are trying to generate the code for other OS. So cross-platform, correct? The platform may be same, may not be same. It may vary. But then, how exactly this is to be done? Because how this translator, assembler is knowing what are the kind of things that are to be included in this file. Correct. So your target would be now for till our next session, which we will be taking probably in next week. So what different, apart from this, what are the different things available? For example, if you see, there is something called as PE format. Fine. So like what is this PE format? So this let me explore. Let me explain that PNE, portable. Okay, portable and exchangeable or extended. Correct. So when we do talk portable and extendable, so when we do talk about this portable format, no matter which operating system you are using, majority of viruses on Windows are written with PE file. portable and executable. And you can get information about these files in the book that I shared, the link which I shared in previous class, linker and loader book. You can that's what I, if you recall, I said that try to read that object code file formats. Right. So they talked about few of them, but like if at all I have to see the different different formats of object code, there are so many formats available. So for example, when we got on this particular NASM-HF, we got to know, okay, there are these many formats. But maybe probably when your new architecture is coming into picture as a competitor, your assembler should support that part as well. How exactly you are going to do that? So we need to understand first architecture of it, and that's what we did rather in Systems 2 course. Like we tried understanding how this Intel architecture works, how the instructions are decoded, encoded, and so on. Our target will be now, without even Intel architecture, how it is done from the source code side. So we will be making some changes in the source code. We will recompile our assembler again, and then we will try to see what kind of output is generated. Correct. Maybe think of this, we'll design our own assembly instruction set probably, and we want that whenever this kind of instruction is, this code should be generated. Correct. So I don't know how many of you completed your assembler assignment in your second semester, but that was one kind of gem assignment if you really work around. If you could successfully do it, then that was one of the best assignment that you could have implemented. Because what you are doing, though we are working with a hypothetical kind of assembler, but we thought that, okay, why not support 32-bit instructions directly? Fine, so work out on that front. So the things that we are going to work out is, first try to understand these all. I don't expect you to go thoroughly with each and every object code format, but try to see, like if I pick, say for example, these two, ELF32 and ELF64, what is the difference between them? Now this AOut is one of the file format introduced by Unix first version of Unix operating system. So their executable file format, they said AOut. And if you see that linker loader book, this AOut is explained there. And whatever AOut file that we get after you create an executable using GCC as a linker or LD as a linker, it is a dedicated name given to that file. Okay. So there is nothing, no ideas behind it. They gave, okay, now as it was first file format supported by Unix for executable, so that's why let us give the name of executable which is generated by GCC as, or which is generated by LD linker as A.out. Okay, and this is one of the file format. Even now this A.out, when if I generate an A.out, for example, on my machine. So if I try to write this file, say for example A.out, it always tells me that it is 32-bit or 64-bit object code or an executable code. Now it never says that I am A.out format, because this A.out is only the name given. Okay, it is only the name given. Now you may see, like even this version, dynamically linked, and it says interpreter. But somebody may argue here, like we were working with a, say for example, compiler or assembler, then why suddenly this came into picture? Correct. So if you recall, when we took a source code line by line, at that time we ultimately did what? We tried identifying each instruction separately, and then we gave treatment to each instruction. Like we saw move EX, EBX. Then we said, okay, move register to register, find out what particular mode this instruction is in. Correct. Then we thought, okay, what are the operands? If EX is specifically there, then this opcode will be different. But if EX is replaced by some other register as a first operand, then here opcode might be different. Correct. So let us try writing this simple code. Now if I take both of these and if I go with mason-elf32 spc.asm, okay, and let me generate the listing. So if I see now this file, now we try to see, like we got 89 for both of them, correct? But if I replace now suddenly both the instructions by add, and if I compile it again, generate that list, and then if I see, even I can find out, okay, there is something called a 0. Okay, both of them are using 0. So it is not making any pattern change with respect to the opcode generation when we do see this kind of operands. But now let me add some more thing. Now by changing the parameter types, so move eax comma keyword of ebx. ECX comma EX. So I am simply taking any random operands and then I am changing now this. And if I again try to generate listing, what is happening? Now if you carefully see, like with both these instructions, okay, when my operands are changed with this combination of instructions, if I pick this one, if I pick this one, what is happening? It definitely is targeting towards operand, and depending upon the first mnemonic, the opcode is picked. Now when to take this call, whether am I supposed to really change the opcode or not, from where it is going to pick. So our target would be to find out where is my opcode table as a data structure, correct? Where this opcode table is written as a data structure which is referred by my translator to generate this file, correct? As well as I need to find out how many passes or how the pass is controlled, correct? So you have to find out opcode, where the opcode table is defined, correct? Then how the pass is controlled. Like okay, and we have mentioned that Mason is a 2-pass assembler, where first pass ends and where second pass starts. Okay, or is it really 2-pass or something else, or it is only 1-pass assembler? Correct. We never can see, like for example, if I go with this real that last time I showed you this capital SA dot out. So I may be able to see the variables that are there added by my code. Okay, depending upon the source code written, or let us take dot .os XAMPP. So readelf-s XAMPP.o. Okay, and these are the sections and then .s. So this is my symbol table. So one can see like this A, MHG, printf, main. Now how this is controlled? How this symbol table is added? Can I locate that thing? Like I can get it by using this readelf utility available, for example, on my machine. So which tells me information about my ELF file. But if at all, like I have to find out it, where exactly this is added, how exactly it is added or done with my object code. Because what I am trying to do is I am trying to extract symbol table from the object code that is generated by my translation instruction. So where this symbol table is, how the symbol table is managed, these are the questions that we need to find out. So whatever assembly process or assembler as a system program we understood, we are going to explore much more greater details. Either we will be working with instructions, whatever manual translation that we did. Okay, for example, which we saw before a while in LST file. how this translation is carried out, how we decided that this should be D8. Though we know that how D8 comes, how D8 is concluded, but how the source code is managing this, how the source code is trying to find out this mod RN. Correct. So these are the few questions that our target would be. Like when I said few questions, we are not going to rely only on those few questions. There are multiple things that needs to be addressed by us. Correct. Now when two object files are combined together, what happens? Right? If there are macros used in my code, how the labels are managed? Are the labels changed? Okay, how it verifies whether one symbol is defined twice? What are the different error messages? Where these all error messages are written? Like for example, when we applied this lesson thing, when it said us this was an error given to us. Now when we do talk about this kind of error, ultimately, how do we know? How do we know all these errors are stored where? Because see, all errors should be stored somewhere. Like if you recall, while discussing, I must have said there is something called error table. Right? In all errors, you have to manage store these errors so that it will be extracting those errors and displaying the errors. So it could be kind of switch case statement that you want to use internally. So how exactly you are going to pick those errors? Like whenever some instruction, some problem is found in the code, this error should be shown or this error should be thrown. If I find some other code or other problem in my code, then this another error should be thrown. How exactly this is managed by the system at the time of translation? How do we know information about all these possible errors that may get generated through the system? Correct. And that is one important aspect that I want you people to work out. Correct. So I took this course earlier only once. Okay, last year none of them were there. Okay, who opted this lesson, but definitely, like in earlier batches, there were two girls only who did this course. I want you to explore many more things so that maybe if we plan to write our own assignment, we should be able to write. Now you may say, what we are doing, we are trying to understand internal details of the structure. So we first need to find out code review कैसे करना होता है, how to review the code. Okay, code read कैसे करना होता है, how to read the code. Correct, because it is written by many contributors. NASM is actually written by many contributors. How this contributed code is to be checked by all of, like each one of us. So that's the reason why I asked you to form pairs. Okay, so that you can work in a pair or a group, and then you can share the knowledge in between. Fine. Any question, query till this time? You can unmute and ask me. Yes? Are you there, or have you started the session and vanished from there?
Hello, sir.
Ah.
Sir, yeah, there is one question. Like when you explained about cross compilation, generating the files for another platform. So in that process, like, does that mean that while we are generating the file for some other platform, so we have the architectural details within our assembler
Correct.
for that platform?
Correct. We need to hide that. That is the reason, like why they separated the dash F option. No? So I want you to do what? Like in source code, find out when you write dash F and something, which is the code or which is the file gets called, which generates that file, the desired file that you are expecting as an auto. Correct? I assume I'm on the right track with respect to your query. Aniket?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question was like, how will you do this? How will you find out it? So definitely you have to go through the say the code where exactly we can find that dash F, and then how exactly we are going to pick the thing. Like if you see, as when I stopped screen sharing, is my screen visible to you?
most.
No. Okay. So if I open the file, the form that I shared with you all, so I got multiple options, like only four of you wrote it. So I got multiple options. Praniti, Rakesh, Gurupal answered this. Okay, Praniti, Rakesh. 14 किसका है?
सर मेरा, मैं नाम लिखना भूल गई.
ओके ओके हाँ, सो रीड करना होता है कैसे लिखना है, तो ठीक है.
सॉरी सर.
तो अभी ये आगे, इफ यू सी यू गॉट मल्टीपल आंसर्स. So some of you wrote is install.sh. Okay, some of you wrote about this. Okay, ultimately, which is the correct answer? Which may get call? How will you know that? Fine, जब आप NASM लिखते हो तो कौन सा फाइल आना चाहिए? AutoConf आएगा क्या? Install.sh में क्या रहेगा? Install.sh में now only information about installation part. Correct. But हाँ, so like see this one. Like I assume this is Isha. ईशा तेरा ही है, किसका ये फिफ्थ वाला? ओके, ईशा ओनली रोट इट. सो इफ यू ओपन दिस कोड एंड गो टू लाइन नंबर 1531. सो NASM वाला जो फाइल था आपका, NASM डॉट सी, कौन सा था? NASM डॉट सी था ना. ASM में NASM डॉट सी. सो इफ यू गो बिलो, ये फाइल ओपन करो. और हमें क्या ढूंढना था? Now see, this is the place where exactly you wrote that error is found. Fine, because now like as Isha answered this, so your work was simplified. Now I was about to ask you, which one do you think is the first file which gets executed? Now if you see this code, ultimately one can see it, the pass is controlled here. This is one of the most important file used there, and here your arguments are verified. What are the different arguments? So somewhere here only you will try to get information about the dash f as well. Okay, and which will be taking you to other you may say other links. When dash f is there, what is to be done? When capital F is there. So if you recall, we used to write DARF as well. Can you recall that? DARF, DWARF. What this DARF plays a role as? Correct. So there are multiple things written there, like with respect to how exactly the string is broken, the instruction is broken into different parts and so on. So my suggestion is, like if you see, these are your first options that you really see with NASM. Okay, starting from line number say K0, pass 1, and then this parameter. Correct. This is the switch case statement. This is parameter 1, NASM dash, what exactly you are going to do. So there is a function which captures everything, like parameter 0 is dash. Correct? You write dash and then you write next parameter. Then how exactly these parameters are managed? Those will get done through ARGC, ARGV. But now when you talk about ARGC and ARGV, you ultimately need to work out when you write dash G, what should happen? When you write capital dash G, whether it available or not. Suppose if I write, say for example, NASM dash capital G dash equal of 32 and say XAMPP dot OSM. Now if I say this unrecognized option, okay, if we copy this and if we search it here, then you will see that this error is found here. So this is default. So that means what are the things about this default case? What are the cases? Not these ones, but in the same. So this was the case. Dash, when case is dash, then what to do? Okay. When case is and what to do, and so on. Now, like this is what I expect you to find out. Each and every minute detail of the whole process. So you should be able to, like, when you are done with this, at least you should have a clear picture of, if at all I have to design an assembler, what exactly I should do. Fine. So to start working around this, so I will not tell you everything, like every time, okay, we do this, do that. You can start working around, and most of the sessions that we will be having now onwards would be collaborative discussions. Right. For example, I will assign one of the team rather to take control of the class, and they will let us know what are their findings. Correct. Maybe 2 teams every day we will try to go with. Fine. Okay. So that their work should be addressed or verified by all of us, so that it will help us to identify majority of things related to internals of an assembler. Pramoti, your partner is missing. Isha, who is your partner? Okay, can you say, I am not able to see the chat window. No one. So you want to work with Anand as an individual. Okay, what about Aniket? Who is your partner?
Yes.
You are alone? Okay. Okay. So yeah, Isha asked one question. When you write dot slash a dot out, okay, a dot out is considered to be first parameter. But while using lesson P0, now if you see this P0 is not ARGV or 0. Please note this. This whole parameters list from ARGV is picked and passed to this array, parameter array, PA. Correct? So you try to find out how exactly this is managed through the source code. Correct. So first of all, your dash will be there. For example, when you write, say, let me write this lesson, dash a elf, okay, and sorry, elf 32. Now when this is executed, okay, now even if I send this program into background, but at the same time, say I am doing this ampersand. Now within a fraction of part it worked out, but I am not able to capture rather what is there in memory. So what happened was, when you wrote this lesson, this was a parameter, like if you see this cursor which is blinking is kind of scanner statement of getS, which is trying to get the parameter. So lesson is your ARGV of 0. Correct. And whatever you write after this would be something else. Correct. Now your dot slash dot out is replaced by lesson. So this dash actually is taking these parameters. And then when you write lesson, if I write this, then it suddenly says, okay, it seems you made a mistake. I could not find this LAMS. Correct. That was what bash is executing some kind of code which verifies what exactly you inputted. Now when it identifies, okay, lesson is the program, the next thing bash doesn't work out. Bash transfers the control to lesson. Suppose if I write, for example, like this, ELF 32 and ZAP. Now as this takes fraction of second, like very small fraction of second, you might have seen rather. Within that time, bash also verified that lesson is a proper program, then control was passed to lesson, the lesson source code was checked or binary was checked, and in that binary it identified whether this dash ELF 32 works or not. So if I write 31, for example, then it said what? That means what? Definitely it is going to check this error somewhere. Correct. So if I say copy it, go to our source code and then write this. So here this output format is verified. Correct. And it tells you that use dash HF from a list. Correct. See this whole thing, like this is percent yes, that is used there. Correct. Which is param. This is a list. This is a variable which is containing that element. Correct. Suppose if you write lesson dash F32 dash O. Then it said what? Oh, sorry. I have told this. Then dash O requires an argument. So if I write P dot O. Now this P dot O, if I try to see what this P dot O means, and if I remove this P dot O, and if I go with this, and if I write file XAMPP.o, you will see that what is difference in both of these? Only name is changed. P dot O is replaced by XAMPP.o. But rest of the things are same. So even if I talk about ls-l, XAMPP.o and P.o. So their file size also is same. Right? And if I try to go with diff even, P.o, XAMPP.o, there is no difference. Difference is 0. But now, if I go with 64, and if I try to write like this, then it says these are binary files and both of them definitely differ. Even I see the size, there is a huge difference because this XAMPP is now a 64-bit file. And if I even check with file, it will tell me that. Correct? Understood? Okay, so this ARGB0 is different than what we are talking about P0. Isha, is it clear? Okay. Any other thing? Any query that you have? Yeah, Aniket?